You know what gives me anxiety? Just looking at this Scantron sheet and holding a number 2 pencil. Do you remember these? You remember? I don't even think they use these anymore, but they're still like, I don't want to see that. Well, many of us have experienced those moments when we are taking a test and then we go blank or we're so nervous we can't recall anything. Test anxiety is real, but there are practical ways for teens to overcome this and excel on tests. And clinical psychologist and co-founder of June Care, Dr. Amy Mazulis, is joining me now. Where were you 20-something years ago? I mean, it's legit. It's real.
It is real.
How, for kids, what are you seeing in your practice for these teens and for kids also taking tests to get into schools and stuff?
Absolutely. So, I mean, look, all of us we remember the Scantrons. We all had a little response to that, right? And it's really normal to have a little bit of anxiety when you walk into a testing situation. You know, you've got final exams, you've got your SATs and ACTs coming up for these high schoolers. But for some teens and young adults, about 40%, that anxiety is persistent enough and severe enough that starts to impact their performance and it impacts their mental health.
40%, almost half of all kids. You know, just talking about tests makes me like shake my knee like this. I always shake my knee and everybody around me hated it, especially during the, stop moving your knee. But that's kind of a thing, right? How do you identify, you know, how does a parent identify when their student needs help?
Sure. I think, you know, anxiety shows up in how we think and how we feel and how we act. And so parents may hear their kids saying some really negative thoughts about tests, like, I'm a terrible test taker, I'm going to bomb this. So they may know that. They may hear their student tell them, my mind just went blank, right? I couldn't think of what I knew. They may see or hear about the anxiety. It's sometimes a little something more that's going on inside. But behaviorally, they'll really notice. So some teens and young adults they'll overstudy, right? You see that kind of frantic, trying to cram in all the information, not a really helpful strategy. But you'll also see avoidance, you know, procrastinating studying, procrastinating preparing, because none of us wants to do things that make us anxious. It makes parents crazy, but it's really an anxiety behavior. But probably the biggest thing parents will notice is that their students' test performance just doesn't match the other things they know about their student.
I've seen that happen before.
They have
like,
good homework scores, they do great on written assignments, but they just bomb the test. And when that's the case, it's often test anxiety.
Okay, so what can be done to alleviate this before the test? You know, say someone's got a test tomorrow and they need your help right now.
Absolutely. No, if you have a test coming up, few things you can do. One, knowing that those negative thoughts are there and trying to catch them and replace them with more helpful ones. So rather than I'm a terrible test taker, thinking to yourself, look, I'm still working on my test taking skills, but I have prepared for this test. I'm going to give it my best. Doing things to manage that sort of behavioral avoidance, practicing at home, like practice really does make perfect. Practicing in test-like conditions can really help. So you know, when you're studying, when you're preparing, put the phone away, put a timer on, make it as kind of realistic to what's going to happen in the test. And then you'll it's like a little mini exposure at home. When you walk into the test, you're a little bit more prepared.
A really good idea. Sit at the kitchen table where it's not quite comfortable.
Exactly. Make it a little bit more like the test-like situation. And then you have to manage that anxiety. So that's stuff like self-care and deep breathing. But honestly, good night's sleep the night before, the single best thing you can do. Still the #1 predictor of test performance.
It's so crazy because you're so anxious you can't sleep. It's like this double-edged sword. So, all right, we're there, we're in the test. What happens next?
During a test, the biggest problem is those panic symptoms, right? Your heart is racing, you can't breathe, and that's when your mind goes blank. You don't have a whole lot of options there, right? You know, you've got to take the test. So best in-the-moment strategy is deep breathing. Just as few as 5 deep breaths lowers your heart rate. Your mind starts to clear. It allows you to refocus on that. And the nice thing about deep breathing is you can do it, no one knows you're doing it. You can do it subtly. You don't have to get up from the testing situation, and it doesn't take much time. So in the moment, that's the best thing you can do to refocus. And if you need to do it again, do it again.
And so don't worry about, like, you gotta, even if you're like, I don't have time to take these deep breaths, you absolutely do have the time.
You're breathing anyways.
You're breathing anyway.
You're breathing anyway.
So just take a moment.
Well make them deep and steady.
Does test anxiety, you know, ever need, like, because I know you have online class, right? Does it ever need more than that? I mean, when does it become something that you really have to talk to kids about consistently?
Absolutely. So we have this online class tomorrow, and I know you'll put the information up for folks. And for many teens, young adults, that's all they need. You know, an online class, some self-help books. But for those who find that their test anxiety is persistent enough and severe enough that it's really impacting their performance and they're not able to meet their goals, right? They're not able to do the things that they want to do with their life. It's impacting their mental health. Then really the next thing I recommend is therapy. And places like June Care, my company, and other therapists who offer therapy, really effective for anxiety in general and test anxiety in particular. So as few as 10 or 12 sessions, and people typically find that their anxiety is much better and they're able to go perform on these tests like they know they're able to.
That's so important too, and I think we all forget too to talk to our schools, talk to administrators. They're actually very, very keen on trying to help whenever they can. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. And like she said, this Thursday, January 11th, Dr. Amy is teaching a class called Overcoming Test Anxiety. The class is free, and we're going to have the details for you on our website.